Hello, everybody, and welcome back to our final episode of Series 7 of the Climate Pioneers Show. This is a slightly postponed episode coming to you as a result of some pre-Christmas lurgy, so thank you for bearing with us. And we're here to round off Series 7 in style. So as you'll know by now from having listened to this series so far, we have been focused on the topic of building teams, hiring and building teams, which is arguably the most important thing that you will do as a founder. How you build out that early stage team is absolutely crucial because it sets that foundation upon which the rest of your business will grow. So if you have missed any of the episodes in this series so far, do go and check them out. I've been speaking to founders, investors, coaches and specialists from across the spectrum of talent and HR, which have been packed full of insights. So yeah, if you've missed any of them, do go back and find them. You can catch them on YouTube, you can catch them on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or on LinkedIn through my profile. So today I'm joined for our final episode by Geraldine Butler-Wright, a Chief People Officer with extensive experience of leading the people and culture functions for many notable startups and scale-ups, where she has built and scaled people and talent functions to support their rapid growth. Geraldine has worked with businesses operating as fully remote, as hybrid, as on-site. She scaled teams across Europe, Asia, and the US. In fact, there's very little she hasn't done or seen throughout her career to date. And just over a year ago, she set up her own consultancy, RorCas, where she works with startups and scale-ups from seed to Series B, sharing this knowledge and insight that she's gained and helping them to get the people part right so the founders can focus on revenue, product market fit, investment, and growth. So G, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and thank you for your lovely introduction.
No problem, my pleasure. So throughout your work with RorCas, you focused, as I said there, on that early part of the journey with founders, that kind of startup, scale up, seed, Series A, B bit of the journey. And when we spoke quite a few weeks ago now, when we were prepping for this episode, you said that's the bit you love the most. Why? I mean, and it is for me too. That's also the same part of the world I work in and equally love it. But for you, why is that? Why do you think that's such an important but exciting time in the people journey for a startup?
Well, to be blunt, as often I am, and candid, I'm a junkie for impact. I love the impact you can get when you're working in a small, agile environment. At that point, there tends to be limited red tape. It hasn't crept in. So you can really get momentum quickly and deliver quickly meaningful people solutions and programs at the beginning, which then can just be this beautiful template for growth that's sustainable for both the people within the company and also for their careers, afterwards. So it's the gift that keeps on giving. So it's the immediacy of, yes, that feels great, we've accomplished something, and also knowing that there's legacy for the company and the people.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I definitely feel that. And you do a lot of work and have done a lot of work at this early stage, right? And particularly through VCs, you work with quite a lot of these quite early stage, often, at the most embryonic stages of an organization, right? When they're very first building out these initial teams. Are there patterns? What are some of the kind of common people related challenges that you see founders facing at these very early stages?
Yeah, so a common pattern is they hire maybe their friends to start off with. And obviously, you don't start talking about in-depth contract negotiations with friends early on when you're starting up with a business. But when things start to scale, maybe they're not the right fit for the role anymore. That can become a really tense situation to manage. So that's some pieces there. There's also the fact that many founders now are coming straight out of university, or maybe it's their first or second actual job. So they haven't gone through the large warehouses of graduate schemes, etc., where you're being taught these core people skills. So they're learning on the job at the same time as trying to scale a company and get investment and get revenue. So there's a lot of strains on the founders that can also, obviously filter into the people and the relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. That sort of second point you made there about, quite often these people haven't been through and learnt people and management skills elsewhere, and they're doing this for the very first time. How do you help people there? You know, if they haven't already, a lot of this stuff is learned through road miles, right? And the doing.
Yes.
So if somebody hasn't done the doing, how can you support them? How do you empower people that haven't been leaders before to learn to do it well?
One of the hats I wear is I'm an executive coach, and actually my absolutely favourite part is helping people who are going to be first-time leaders. So they're brilliant individual contributors, and they've been stuck into suddenly they're managing a team of 20 people. Or as a founder, suddenly you're going, okay, well, look, I'm brilliant engineer. I can write code. I created this brilliant product, or I'm brilliant at sales, but now I'm managing a team of 20 people. So it's working out, really partnering side by side with them, what their preferences are, where they excel, also the areas actually of development. So having those conversations with them, testing, real-time issues that come up for them, to then work out where you can leverage their strengths, where they're best placed, and also when they're going to need extra bench strength to actually fill in those gaps for them. Is it coachable, or is it just not for them?
I was going to say, is that sometimes the case? That can anybody be taught to be a good leader, or are there some people who just
some people they just don't want to. They just don't want to. They want to be. I see this very prevalent in engineering, tech companies that I work with. You'll get somebody who's an absolutely amazing engineer, phenomenal, a genius, an absolute genius. And the founders go, okay, you're great. So we need you to replicate that with 20 other people. And they've got no interest in doing that. They don't want to. And you'll lose that person where they can go and just be an individual. They can be their exceptional individual contributor. They can wear that hat and be comfortable with it and contribute in that way. So one of the passions I have, many passions I have about people, is making sure that when you're designing career pathways, you're seeing how people can progress as individual contributors as well as progressing as people managers. So there is that feeling of momentum and contribution to the company, but in return there's that recognition there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned there about that organizational design piece then, and helping companies to build those career pathways out as they scale their teams. At what stage do companies need to start thinking about that? Is that something that they should, because as they're, and perhaps you could talk us through how that's going to evolve, right? So as they're building out their first team, like their first 10 hires, do they need to be thinking that far ahead or not? How does that evolve?
I mean, there's so many different factors that play into that. So which markets they're going to, are they going to be rapidly growing, all kinds of other things. So one thing I'd say is 10, you're probably okay not to be thinking about career pathways right then. Once you start going from 10 to 20, start thinking about it seriously. I have a client who've they've chosen to have a very small team, very flat structure, but they have been very, very intentional. We did some brilliant work with Guesswise about actually building out career pathways for a small team and what that actually looks like. Because what it does is it helps align, these are our goals, these are objectives, this is what we're doing. This is actually what the roles we need to do that. It gets you thinking very intentionally about how you're going to meet those goals through people. And also those career pathways are the gift that keeps on giving, because it informs how you recruit. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. You've got your skills, abilities, you've got your values there at different levels, what the expectations are there. You pretty much provide a script for feedback conversations, which is brilliant. And also when there is a misalignment, maybe the role isn't right anymore, or the person isn't right for that role, you can point to data points. You can point to, well, this is what we need. So you're not having to scramble around or think, oh, this just doesn't feel right. You're actually measuring against. And that also helps with transparency, trust, clarity, retention, attraction. So, if any founders out there are actually listening and thinking, well, what should I prioritize first as a people? Get your career pathway sorted out as soon as you can. It really is, hits multiple birds with one stone.
Yeah. And just that piece there about, if you've thought in advance of what somebody needs to achieve to progress to that next level, it makes you think about what being good in that role looks like. And so then you can assess really fairly, is this person getting on well or not? Because I think sometimes you can hire someone into a job and you're relying very much on gut feel as to whether they're performing well in that role, right? Rather than it being. And so when it does come to people underperforming, or yeah, you're right, those conversations can happen from a much better informed, much more factual place if you've laid that framework out in advance.
Yeah, and then it helps with the self-awareness of the people as well, so it's not just their manager or the founder saying, oh, well, you are or you aren't meeting this. You can actually look at it yourself and go, all right, is this working? Is it not? You empower the people to have the conversations with their leadership about their development and areas that they could be upskilled into. So it then democratizes the conversation as well, which is fantastic. It's not just the manager's job, it's both of your jobs. It's a relationship, a two-way street. So yeah, I love career pathways, as you can probably gather from this. I'm just geeking out on career pathways.
As all good people should, right? And I think one of the things that probably holds early stage founders back from thinking about this stuff is this lack of clarity, perhaps in their own mind, or lack of certainty about direction. And with really early stage companies, there is so much ambiguity, there's so much change. The entire strategy can pivot in a heartbeat, right? And so I suppose founders can perhaps sometimes feel nervous to wed themselves or make explicit promises almost to people about the direction of a career within an organization when they themselves aren't really sure what direction that organization is going to go in, and therefore what the needs of it might be. So how can you marry the tension there between, let's have a pathway that sets some kind of, direction for us, but also enables us to be really nimble?
Yeah, so it's openness and transparency at the front end, right? So talking with your people and saying, this is what we anticipate is the most likely career path within our company. We are not a large corporate organization with a incredibly proved product market fit, but we think, knowing what we know, being intelligent people, this is the future that we see, and these are the roles that we need. Now, on a career pathways, you don't have to include, you can include roles that aren't necessarily going to be needed for the next 6 months or a year, but it's showing that they're in your thought process, that they're there. So it's providing some kind of framework rather than kind of muddling through. And I can guarantee you, in my experience, providing something, an intention, this is what we think is most likely, is far better than nothing at all.
Yeah, that's fair. I suppose at least if they've got something, you caveat it with, but obviously we're an early stage company. So with the goals and the intentions that we have of getting to here, these would be the pathways to take us there. If that goal changes, then we will revisit,
And just getting it down on paper or on your screen can actually help the process of, is this the right role that we need right now, rather than just sort of thinking of it out and about up there in your thought process. And you can pretty much predict which roles you need if you're being very clear on what your vision is, what your mission is, what your goals are, and alignment. Then really everything else falls into place.
Yeah. And in terms of, one of the things that I know you talk a lot about is helping companies build teams of A players, right? Really attract and retain the very best talent. How do you help organizations to do that? How do you help them to understand where that bar is? What makes an A player for them? Because that in itself can be subjective. And just talk me through that process of how you get them to set the bar and the caliber of the people that you hire.
I mean, it does go back as well to the career pathway. So that piece of work actually informs what an A player is and what the expectations are at different levels. So I think that is, it sounds saying the same thing again and again, but that really does help massively with that. I think with A players as well, it's making sure at the front end that you're being really rigorous around your recruitment process, and being clear what you do want, what's non-negotiable, what isn't, what could be okay, but being eyes fully wide open on what you're willing to compromise on and what you won't. It's the old adage, hire slow and fire fast. One of the really key things is if somebody isn't performing, they're given the opportunity, they're given the feedback, it's not the right fit, act on it, because what it will do is it will impact the A players. They'll go. A players, there's so many studies that have been done about this. One of the main motivators for A players is working with other A players, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So it's above money. It's above learning and development. It's above anything else. They want to work with smart people. It energizes them. It keeps them retained. It makes them want to bring in other A players. If you start bringing in if you start bringing in Bs or Cs or Ds, they're going to start hiring D's, E's, F's, etc. And you lose them, and it takes a lot to recover. It really does. It's chronic for a business to recover from that. And if you think about it, when it comes to actually replace a hire, it's anywhere between 50% to 200% of an annual salary. It's really expensive. That's how you're looking at just monetarily terms. Never mind about the revenue that's going to be offered and all those opportunities. So it's so important. And I think with blitzscaling, I used to be a big fan of blitzscaling, and I was obsessed with the book. Reid Hoffman, I still love Reid Hoffman and all of his thoughts on it. But I think there's a lot, there's been a lot of casualties of blitzscaling and being like, we just need to get somebody in, and it's kind of like warm body recruitment. They'll work it out. If they don't work it out, then we'll get rid of them and we'll hire somebody else in. It destroys a company and it costs a fortune. It chomps through your revenue and your runway like just frantic beasts. So really, think really hard when you're hiring people. There's the flip side to this as well, where you see that there's recruitment processes that have got like 15 interviews. I'm not joking. I've heard this. I actually experienced it once in my career, and I was like, hang on, this does suggest that there's some indecision going on here. Do you know what you're actually hiring for? So I think that's something you've got to balance as a founder and as high. So do you be clear what you actually, what's the end goal? Who do you want? Right. But also just be realistic as well when you're actually, dealing with the candidates and respectful of their time. Because that's another thing to turn off an A player, is if people are faffing around too much. If you knew a good thing, go for it.
Streamlined, efficient, decisive, clarity about what you want. Yes. And I think on that sort of hire slow, fire fast thing, I think there's so many difficult factors that play into that fire fast thing. But I think one of them, other than pride, which is the obvious one, is that I think people underestimate their other team members' ability to have spotted that person wasn't working out, and they think, I don't want to get rid of this person because it will really demotivate everybody else. And actually it's far more demotivating to keep the underperformer because everyone else has spotted it. Everybody else knows they're not performing. It's you're right, it's more damaging to keep them than it is to just walk away.
And culture becomes what you choose to ignore. So that will be so toxic for your company, because it will poison the well. And I use very strong words here, but it does. It'll turn off talent. People won't recommend the company. It'll be a hard battle to get out of. So if it's not working, have those candid conversations with the person. Give them a chance. There's kindness as well. So, often, I've handled, sensitive exits and numerous exits in my time. When you deal with that conversation in a kind, human way, which should be the goal every time, a lot of the time people are relieved. They've known the writing is on the wall, but for whatever reason, maybe they couldn't, or they didn't feel comfortable enough. The market was volatile. They didn't feel comfortable to move. They can feel relieved that, that chapter's closed, and just helping that person go to their next chapter, as helpfully as you can financially, helping them with CVs, helping them with contacts, being an adult about it can make a huge difference.
And another difficult point in that is the founder themselves getting to a point where they feel they've done all they can, because sometimes there can be some guilt there. Did I do all I could as a leader, as a manager of that person to help them? Is this a failing on my part, my inability to train them and get them to the level they need to be? So how do you coach people around that? And what are some helpful things people could start to think about themselves as to whether, is it me or is it them?
Yeah, is it me or is it them? I think it's often with founders that are struggling in this situation. I've counted numerous times, and this can be very, very experienced founders.
Yeah.
They've got so many other things on their plate. It's very easy to avoid this situation and hope it will go away. It won't. It's not going anywhere. It's gonna get more intense. So it's helping them, I found very helpful, to provide them with data points of what they're looking for. So coaching them through, well, what if you were going to hire for this role again, would you hire this person into the role knowing what you know? And if the answer is no, then it's almost sort of they give themselves permission that this isn't right, and to have that conversation. And it's really just, looking at when you have those difficult conversations as a founder, finding the right words to say, and to really ramp up the empathy and think, well, look, if I was being told this, or I was having this conversation, what would I want to be hearing on the other side? So generally, I tend to coach founders through those conversations, find out some data points, so it becomes less of opinion and more fact, and eases that decision process in, again, that kind way, because people generally like to be kind and nice to each other. I'm an optimist in life, but they do. So to help to facilitate that, it can be easier said than done, or it can be easier than people think it can be when it's initially when they're faced with it. If you break it down.
Those kind of open and building. I mean, I think ultimately you're right. People want to be able to communicate well. People want to have this culture of kind of open and honest feedback, but it's difficult. It's really tough. And it's something that you need to practice. It's a muscle. It's something that you sort of develop over time, this ability to have these tough conversations kindly. If people haven't been from an environment where that was part of the culture, and they haven't practiced it and they haven't done it before, how can you, or what are some early steps, processes that founders can start to put in place in their own company that start to build that feedback-centered culture? You're not waiting for there to be a problem and then now we've got to have a horrid conversation, but starting it right from the outset. What do you think?
So it's, to your point, it's practice makes perfect. So it's building a strong emotional bank account with people in your team. So calling out the positives when you see them, getting to know them, getting to know what actually ticks, what goes on in their life. So you've got that 360 view of their life and how it can actually impact performance. So you're getting to know them on a very human level. One of the things as well, so you're used to giving positive feedback, but also not just going, that was a great job. That's rubbish feedback. That is totally rubbish feedback. Let me just be super judgmental on this one, because it doesn't help anybody other than like, oh, okay, great. So I think in terms of what you can do as a founder and what your people can do for you as well, you help each other with this. So when somebody says, oh, that was great feedback, that was great, there was a great job, say, oh, what specifically did you like about it? What did you find was helpful? So get them to be more specific. When you're giving feedback, be more specific. That was a great client call. You were on point. You created brilliant data sheets beforehand. You answered the questions. So you are reinforcing the good behaviors that you want to see moving forward. So I think that is super helpful. I've done this with very early stage companies and larger companies, but also looking at feedback principles. So I like using a product design approach when I'm designing people programs. So we find out actually what the problems are to start with, rather than presume. Then look at different models that are out there. So with feedback, things like radical candor, situation, behavior, impact, all these kind of things. The poop panini, that's not a technical one, but the sandwich. So how does that work within your company? Test it, do workshops with your people. And this can be with like 10 to 20 people. It's never too early to do this, because it's getting the bedrock in place, right? Work it out. Then put your feedback principles together. So this is how we're going to give feedback to each other. So it's super intentional. You find out the different preferences within your team. You have those sort of aligned to your values. You have them running alongside your values. So again, people know the language that they can use when they're giving feedback or they're receiving feedback from their colleagues. And what you're doing is you're helping that conversation become part of the rhythms of your company. So it's easier. You're not stumbling for the words. It's like going to the gym. You're building that muscle memory, and those kind of things with intentionality, really it being part of the company culture can help massively and is totally scalable.
Yeah. I love that. That's brilliant. And to the point about sort of just jumping back a second to that point about hiring slow, firing fast, and knowing when somebody's working out and knowing when somebody isn't. One of the things that I see come up often with very early stage companies is that you have founders that are hiring into building functions and hiring into roles that they themselves do not know about. So they are a non-technical founder. They need to hire a technical co-founder. They need to make their first product hire. And they don't know, upon interviewing for that role, what makes a good product person, what makes a good technical person. Okay, they can get some support, that's partly a lot of what I do is help support with that. Also, they can get people in their network perhaps to be involved. So the hiring and the bringing in of people, fine. But once somebody's in the job, the managing them, the figuring out, are they doing a good job or not? There can be quite a lot of opacity there, opaqueness about whether that person's doing a good job or isn't. How do you advise people who don't know a function to manage a function they don't know and figure out if it's working?
Excellent question. I think there's a lot of help that can be from your network, as you were saying before. So those check-in points with external advisors. So with investors, with VCs, they will have a group of advisors that potentially you can tap into. That could be that check-in every month or 3 months while somebody's getting embedded into the organization, just to see if it's actually trending in the right direction in terms of their onboarding. Saying that it depends on the level of seniority of the role, but if you can get somebody who's a fractional expert, and be that mentor at the beginning, help with their onboarding if they know the founder as well, that can help massively with that piece. So there's those touch points that can certainly help. It's not a silver bullet, it's a tricky one, but only time will tell as well. So it's what the results are.
Yes.
So there's a point of a founder where they have to trust in somebody else and let them look after it. So it's really important to actually double down, not necessarily on the technical expertise, but the other aspects. How can they trust that person being responsible for that area? What's the relationship going to be like there? I think that is going to be the secret sauce.
Absolutely. But I love that point about keeping the investors, the external advisors, somebody fractional perhaps, involved throughout, rather than just utilizing them up front through the recruitment process, but also then using them through that settling in period as a touch point, as another set of eyes of, are we going in the right direction? Are we doing the right thing here? For sure.
Yeah. It's mega helpful. It really is. And it gives that rudder really, and sets them off on the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I want to come to now is this hybrid versus remote, right? And this is, the battle that's been raging for the last 5 years, and we're still not, we're about 4 or 5 years into it, and nobody's getting it quite right yet. And, different shades of wrong on either side of the spectrum. And there's still a lot of divided opinion on what the best way to build a company is, what the best way to build a strong culture is. And of course, there are benefits, there are drawbacks to both, but what are your opinions on what founders need to be mindful of when they're building, either as a remote or as a hybrid company? And what about when there's that messy mix of the two, right? Where, perhaps you're a hybrid business, but one team is remote. How can companies do this well?
Yeah. So intentionality. It's not going to work itself out. Let's just not do we'll do this and then we'll see what happens and we'll muddle through. Please don't do this. Please. It's really the implications will be huge. I think one of the great ways of testing, say let's isolate one of those. There's so much to unpack there. So if we isolate their situation, if you've been remote and now you're going to go hybrid or you're going to go in the office, as a leader, walk in the shoes of your people.
Okay.
Go and do a commute. You're asking them to come in 4 days a week. Go and do a commute 4 days a week. Find out what that actually feels like during rush hour. Find out what it would feel like with a school drop off or pick up, or caring responsibilities or whatever. Get a test it as the leader of how that's going to actually play out. And it's a very good reality check of what that's going to mean. And think about the expectations of when do you want people to be working. And, you know, it takes when you're in an office environment, which I do think has got a range of benefits. So I'm not just fully remote all the way. I used to be, but I'm coming round now. So, you know, have a think about, you know, there are studies there that say it takes 20 minutes to regain concentration when you're interrupted. Right?
Okay.
20 minutes. So when you're in an office environment, how are you ensuring that there's concentration for your people that need to concentrate? So for jobs that are high concentration, high focus jobs, doesn't make sense to have them in there. So it's very intentional about the design of work. So if you're an engineer that needs to be concentrating purely on code and deep concentration, is it going to be helpful to be in a busy office environment right beside the sales team that are very gregarious? And I'm completely and utterly generalizing, but is that going to be a good return on investment and helpful to enable people to do the best work of their lives? So if you're expecting people to come into the office, why? So it's going back to that product mindset. What problem are we trying to solve here? And being very clear with your people on, we want you in the office because of X, Y, and Z. But be specific. Don't just say, we want you to bond, please. Like, you're asking me as an employee to come into the office to spend the money on travel that you're not going to reimburse me for what reason? You're going to ask me to pay for extra childcare now because I'm going to take an hour either side to actually, you know, need to commute and to come in. So you need to sell it. That's the reality. You need to sell it in. Now, for employers at the moment, because the market has been so brutal, that, you know, there is more leverage. So it's like, well, if you want a job and you want some money, then you got to get yourself in the office. But I think not to be flippant with that. It's really important to say, what is the point? What's the meaning of this? And also to think about, you know, a work policy, and not to be all HR human remains about it, but like to be, again, very clear about why we're doing this. So we have a hybrid work environment because of this. Our core hours are this. You know, our main communication is async for this bit. You know, our teams based over here need to be online for this time. So just being really strategic and thoughtful, time zones, commute times, when it's compulsory, why it's compulsory, check, test to see if it's actually working as well. And also be prepared as an employer to actually say, look, we're doing this. You know, we're going to spend a lot of money on an office space because of this reason, versus, you know, answer the question that's in people's minds. Why don't I get that money put into my salary or benefits? So just be on the front foot with it.
Yeah. And how do you ensure continuity of culture, continuity of employee experience when you do have those differences, intentional though they may be, between different teams and working arrangements for those different teams? You've got some people in the office, some people remote. How do you ensure that continuity?
Yeah, so it's making sure again that the values, the culture that runs throughout the entire people experience. So there's consistency there. It's also human interaction, right? So at least every quarter, getting an opportunity for everybody to come together. They have a purpose, whether it's the, you know, an alignment of what the goals, the vision, the objectives, etc. is. But then also allow for fun. Right. So allow for time to actually get together, do a fun activity, go out for dinner, go out for lunch, you know, so people can get to know each other. I think that is absolutely key. It's human connection, belonging, and being in a remote environment world that we have been in really for the last 5 years, pretty much. It's so important to get that feeling of belonging, and it helps dramatically when it comes to mental health and stress. And, you know, it's not loneliness is a really bad thing for your health. So creating those connections and opportunities for people to come together intentionally is, I think, one of the healthiest things you can do as a company.
And just calling out the obvious, things people are doing wrong, the elephants in the room when it comes to remote. What are we still getting wrong by and large? What do you see come up time and again that people are getting wrong when they're working remotely and they're not getting that engagement, they're not building that culture?
Rubbish onboarding.
Yeah.
They've got no laptop when they start.
Yeah.
Their manager's gone on holiday for 2 weeks and there's nobody else to back up. They suddenly find out they've got team members they never met before. Maybe a couple of them have got performance issues. Happy days all the way. I mean, this happens if you're hybrid or not, but getting the basic setup on day one so you feel welcomed and wanted, introducing them on an all hands, a remote all hands, taking them through some of the ways of communication, the policies, the procedures. Are they okay? Do they know where they stand? Buddying them up, so just kind of throwing somebody in. And you hear them quite a lot, quite interestingly, with not all, and I make this very clear, not all, but some fintech startups, international ones, can be like this. I've heard there's a trend with this, which is like, oh, they'll be fine. They'll get on with it. They're tough. They're fine. I mean, they're working remotely. Why would they complain anyways? And it's like, no, let's just have a little bit of care for these people their first day, because it helps you. Even if you take the sort of kindness and sort of just human aspects out of it, it is a better and quicker return on your investment if you show care when somebody starts, because they're not fumbling around trying to get their log on, and it takes longer to actually ramp up. So I think that's really important in the immediate. And then it's just the check-in points with the remote. I think remote is I'm a big fan of remote, but it is important that there's very clear communication. So how do people communicate with each other? How are people held accountable for their work? Using Jira, using are you Confluent, or whichever sort of form of communication that you're wanting to do. How do people know where they stand? Those kind of things. So alignment, I think you have to double down with alignment in remote working environment, rather than it just kind of being found out, as you can when you're in the office. You can stumble across things.
Yeah. Love that. Okay, perfect. And I mean, company culture is something that you do very well, right? When you were at Healthily, the company achieved a very good employer brand and got a really strong score on Glassdoor. I think 4.5 out of 5, got a most loved workplace award. What was some of the lessons there, or some of the things that were implemented there that underpinned that culture, that led to that would be easily replicable, I suppose, by other companies? What are some sort of advice, I suppose, from that experience that you would give?
Yeah, so Matteo Bellucci, CEO, dear friend, he led from the top on culture. He took it so seriously, and he only hired other people who took it really seriously, and he walked the walk and talked the talk. And it was through the entire people experience, those culture points. When we hired people, we assessed whether they were technically brilliant, and the interview panelists also had questions which were very honed on cultural compatibility. That was before you even got in the door. And also, even we had one instance actually where we pulled an offer because somehow they got through the process, this individual, but they started demonstrating qualities which would not adhere to our values before they were onboarded. And we had a conversation, very nice conversation, just thinking this isn't going to be the right role for you. So we were very, very strong on what we would accept as culture and what we wanted and what people could add. So it wasn't just adherence to our cultures, what could you actually add to the culture as well? So spending time to talk through with that person what's important to them, what motivates them, because that was the baseline for everything else that moved on. And as well, being prepared to make hard decisions. If somebody might be technically brilliant in a role, but they weren't being very culturally additive, that's the word. So it's kind of like, this doesn't work for us. There's a chance to realign and get back on the bus, but it's those points again. Culture becomes what you choose to ignore, and it was such effort was put into that and it was a collective culture. It was owned by everybody. So pretty much, I know when my job title, I was Chief People and Culture Officer, but actually I was just a curator of the culture. Pretty much everyone was head of culture after their name, after their job. So engineer, head of culture, and one of the things that I love about Healthily, I love this company so dearly, and I still do executive advisory work with them, is we've got a WhatsApp group for the alumni of Healthily. And we regularly meet up at least 2-3 times a year, because the culture was so strong, it exists way beyond the actual time we had with the company. That's how much we love this company.
That's very unusual and lovely. Often there will be a WhatsApp for the alumni of a company because they all want to get together and moan about the company after they've left rather than because they love it. So that's testament to a great culture, isn't it?
Yeah, and transparency, trust, honesty, really, really important. You could see that through everything we did, from the meetings done on Monday, decision meetings. People would come along, anybody can come along. What's the decision we need to be made? What's the visibility on it? Accountability at the end of the week, sending an update on. Those are just little operational things, but they had a big impact on, accountability. What are our goals? Did we achieve them? At the end of the week. So yeah, I'm super proud of that time.
Yeah, that's lovely. And it's those little things, you say they're little operational things. They're the things that make the culture, right? Though the culture is a sort of cumulative effect of all of those little things, every little conversation, every little meeting, just the way it's done, right? That is just so important. And I know rapid scale, you talked earlier there about blitz scaling, you mentioned, and rapid scale up is something you've done a lot of. You've scaled companies by thousands in a year, right? Phenomenal levels of growth. What do you learn, I suppose? What important lessons have you learned about scaling and scaling at that pace? And when we marry that with culture, how do you maintain a great culture and scale that fast? Is it even possible? Or do you almost have to let it go for a period and then realign? Talk to me through how you deal with that blitz scaling process.
Right. Military style precision and planning. I cannot emphasize this enough. And being best mates with your CFO and your operations people, right? So and your leadership team, but the finance and HR dimension is so important. One of the most important relationships I think any HR leader can have. So looking at, we had people steering committees. So you start off with a very clear headcount plan. What are the goals? What are the objectives that we're needing to achieve in this next quarter, 6 months, a year? Getting a sense from a wish list from all of your leaders of the key positions they need, and they have to specify and justify how it's linked to the goal, specifically that goal. It's not just I need this person. It's not, no, hell no. It's how specifically you're going to answer that, and the rigor around that. Having the wish list, prioritizing in a RAG status, which are your absolute must-haves, which you would be handy, which ones are don't need it right now, but need it down the line, right? I've got a master spreadsheet on this. I love this spreadsheet so much. I've carried it with me pretty much every job I have. I love the spreadsheet. I'm going into granular layers of detail here, but it's just so important. So again, allow my geekgasming. So, speaking with your CEO, your CFO, and people, and working out those priorities, liaising with the leaders, getting your priority lists and keeping that live every week of the status and the owners of those roles. That so if there are issues, if say something's stalling for whatever reason, if the priority has changed, that everybody's on top of it. There's full visibility on those roles and where they are. And if there's a problem, can it be unblocked? So things don't just get lost and they seep through and they just disappear into the ether. So military-sized position with that. Very, very clear recruitment plans, who's on the plan, who's asking what are the timescales, getting your teams as well to draw up how long realistically it's going to take to hire these roles, factoring in some extra time, a few weeks, a month, maybe extra, to be blunt, just in case there's something, an offer gets declined, you've got to go back to the beginning, you never know what's happening. So really road mapping it out in incredible detail as much as you can, and then monitoring the spend, obviously, as you're going through to make sure that you're not going to be in a shortfall or where you need to maybe cut other positions and have other ones. So full transparency, mega organization, and just keeping the machine just running really rigorously. And there's actually a great deal of satisfaction that can come from that as well. But going back to that sort of impact junkie that I am, that was something that you could see the progress every week, which was just joy. It was an absolute joy to see. And obviously making sure that once people are on board, they've got a really good onboarding plan. And there's lots of rigor around that. Who's doing what, when, who is owning it? What are the expectations? What of those people for a month, 30, 60, 90-day plan? So it's intentionality. There's a common theme coming up, but just like intentionality, planning, rigor, just get organized. And it can be easily done. You just got to get on with it and just be very clear.
And the culture piece, because there's this, I imagine when you need to scale at that pace, it's very easy for urgency bias to creep into the hiring process. And to hit these milestones, to get these people in the door, we need one. And especially if you are undertaking a scale up like this in a market where candidate availability is low, and it's, we need 5 engineers, and so they've got the skills, get them in. They might not be the perfect culture fit. We'll worry about that down the line. How much wiggle room is there for that attitude? You have to be, again, rigorous with that culture piece as well. What are your thoughts on?
It's a false economy. Compromising. Right. It really is a false economy on that, because as we were saying, it's going to be very costly to go and hire people in, either from a monetary point of view, but also from a business point of view, which ultimately is a monetary point of view. So it's being able to effectively offer options. I wouldn't say push back, but offer options. This is what the potential future can be, and this is how we can mitigate it. So, and having that rigor around those questions, those cultural questions right at the beginning, and getting on the front foot. So saying, look, we need to plan for the worst, and let's hope for the best and work towards the best as well. So how are we? So let's say we're not going to hire 5 engineers next week. How's the current team going to work with that? Can anything be outsourced? Where else is it going to be? So you manage that stress level accordingly. So we're going to do this, but we need a backup plan.
Yeah.
Because that also ensures that the people in those roles don't break and leave.
Yeah. Okay, good. So having that good contingency, and then making sure you maintain a high bar for culture, because any compromise on that is a false economy later down the line.
And going full circle again to banging my drum on the career pathways, making sure that you've got culture, and we did this with Guestwise, and I've done it with other clients, where you've got your levels of expectations at career pathways, but they're aligned with the values as well. So what values, different levels, what the expectations are for values as well at that stage. So that's something that's really helpful.
Yeah. Interesting. And I think probably also fairly valuable. Do you advocate for companies having a kind of consistent way of screening for what a culture fit looks like across the organization, across any roles? There's just this one clear metric for you're a culture additive or you're not. And whether it's me interviewing you or whether it's someone in another team interviewing you, we've all got a clear bar on what a good culture fit for this organization looks like.
Yeah, because what it could mean to you may mean something completely different to me. So actually thrashing that out, and if you can get it's this co-development piece when you're developing values and culture and career pathways, get the people involved in helping to define what that is. So it's not just top down in management or HR saying this is what it is, because it might be something completely different. That's why you need to stress test it with your people first to see if it's actually a reflection of how we do things around here.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, perfect. One of the things you talked about early on was this challenge often in early stage businesses that founders will, early days, hire their friends or hire somebody they know, or, who the person who was right for you at the beginning, a co-founder even maybe, that was right person as the company was going from 0 to 50 people, might not be the right person as you then scale beyond that. And that can be a really difficult conversation to have. or a co-founder breakup when you both wanted the same thing, but actually the path of the organization changed, the strategy changed, and actually the way it's now heading, one of the founders doesn't want anymore. How can you help founders, co-founders to navigate this as the organization grows, scales, pivots, changes, making sure everybody's aligned and having those conversations that when they're not aligned, it can be as amicable a breakup as possible?
Yeah, I'd go back a step first, just from a practical point of view. Get your prenup sorted out, founders. So maybe all fun and games now, but seriously, go get some legal agreements, sorted out early on. No ambiguity, because it will really help. Because sometimes things may work out swimmingly, absolutely brilliantly, but sometimes they might not. So know where you stand. Get that sorted out. Have that difficult conversation. Well, it doesn't even have to be difficult, because it's not difficult yet. It could be difficult, but be preemptive about it. Work out what would be the approach, and it's just a very simple way of doing things, and reduces ambiguity, and everybody knows where they stand, and it takes the emotion out of it a little bit as well. So, which is really helpful, because more emotions can make it a lot harder. So yes, get the legal requirements sorted out. And there's some fantastic advice from Tom Bohls, who runs Founders Law, and he's a big advocate of this. So I'm going to plug Tom there for that, but that's a good way to start. So what happens when things start to get a bit off? Again, avoidance is classic. He's a classic with this. Can get political as well, and you can start getting divisions within the company. Really important to understand that all eyes are on you as founders. You are the template that everybody is looking to. So if it's acceptable for you to behave like that, sure as hell acceptable for me to behave like that, because that's just the way the world works. So you're creating that culture and environment around you. So if there are disagreements, try and keep it between yourselves, rather than it, trying to create these fiefdoms. If that's happening, that's pretty much a sure marker there's some big problems happening. Leverage your advisors. Often you need a third party to try and just work out. It's almost like counselling, marriage sort of situation. You need a third party sometimes, and that's where advisors come in, or people. Invest in sometimes investors that can help, or chairs that are involved in things, to actually just come in and find out what the issues are, and sort of get under the hood of what it is. Because often what the sort of the top level issue, the beef is at that time, is actually got nothing to do with that. It's all these other things. It's a bit like couples that have got issues with stacking the dishwasher, right? It's got nothing to do with the dishwasher. There's a whole lot of other stuff going on. Or children actually completely losing their minds, as we were talking about earlier. Completely losing their minds. It's got nothing to do with the toy not going in the bath at the right time or something. Anyway, so yes, back to the point. I think it is one of those things where get a third party, if you can help, to work out what the actual issues are, and just having that conversation about, is this right now for us anymore? Where do we want to be? So finding out where the shared goals and objectives are. Where do we want to be? Do we want the same things? Can we get there together? And if not, how can we do this in an amicable way? Because it is a small world. And so there's that aspect. It's a small world, so that's not very healthy if it's a big breakup. But also, it's just from just not leaving a relationship with PTSD, quite frankly. Body count that comes around that from the rest of your team members. So to move on in a healthy way, what's going to think about what the wants are. What do you need as an individual for that to happen, and be very specific about it. So it's just that clarity and giving your head a wobble and thinking, is this what I want to do with my life? And if it's not, then being decisive and doing something about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of what you've talked about today really relies on founders leading from the front, owning this from the top down, as you said, was done so brilliantly at Healthily, and really driving this. And that takes a huge amount of energy. You have to really live and breathe and be the kind of the driving force of this culture. And you need to do that from you've got to protect yourself, right? You've got to be able to reserve some energy to be able to do that and to do that well. And it can be really, really tough, right? Being a founder is, it takes everything from you. And we're about 2 years in now to a really tough market. People have been going and going at this for 2 years, and I'm seeing a lot of burnout. A lot of people surviving, rather than thriving in this market. And it's exhausting. And so a lot of these things are slipping. So in order to do this well, founders really have to protect their own energy, their own mental health. How do you help founders do that? What are some really simple, easy practices, boundaries, things they need to be thinking about that can help them be the best founder they can be?
Being sacred time, right? So I'm not going all religious, but blocking out in your diary time that is for, quite frankly, exercise or something that you enjoy. Exercise is really important because it gets the blood moving, it gets the brain, you just feel it a lot better. Find what your exercise is, right? I like to walk. I love walking. It walks the dog as well, so it's like a double win. So I've got a crazy cocker spaniel all over me. He's exhausted for about 5 minutes, but I have that 5 minutes when he's tired. So find out, just get that time in your diary and don't move it. Now, sometimes it means that, say for me, for instance, I will have a call when I'm walking, but I'm walking. I'm doing it. So that's the only kind of compromise I'll make with that, is I'll do a call while I'm walking, but I'm walking and I'm getting that exercise in every day. And it's super important for my mental health. So as founders, find out what that relaxation point is. Maybe it's having time with your family. Maybe it's reading a book. Maybe it's meditating. Maybe it's exercising. Just get that time, an hour a day for yourself, because if you don't fit your oxygen masks, classic saying, you're going to be useless. I think this is really important as well. If you don't look after yourself, you're useless to everybody else. So do it for everybody else if you don't want to do it for yourself. So I think that's really an important factor. And a really helpful mental health exercise I find is at the end of the week, instead of focusing on everything that you didn't do and just beating yourself up, and I use this with my coaching clients as well, focus on what you did do, even if it's 2 or 3 things. You did those 2 or 3 things, and write them down, because when you write down things, it actually helps. You remember them, which is a good thing. So you don't discount it. So it doesn't even have to be 5 minutes. It can be 2 minutes at the end of the week. This is what I did. Of course, you can have your to-do list, but this is what I actually did and accomplished. And that's a really important mental health trick to keep your sanity. Surround yourself with people that you can trust. The most important hires that you can make as a founder are your leadership team. They are your, I was going to say knights, but that's actually a bit discriminatory, but your shining knights, male and female. We can do female knights. Yeah, they had it in Game of Thrones, so let's go with it. So, they are the people that you need to trust implicitly. If you don't trust one of those people for whatever reason, then there needs to be a reconfiguration of what you're doing, because it's going to distract you from doing what you need to achieve, which is run that company and run it effectively. So that is mega important. And also from your team. So it's a give and take, especially with that leadership and founder dimension, is having that communication, that open form of communication, where they know what the tells are when you're stressed and you know what their tells are. Ask them. I've got this brilliant document called Read Me document. We go through values for teams, values, what your values are, how you know you're derailing, how you like feedback, how you like to give feedback, all these things. So you demystify the process as soon as you start, when you onboard. Brilliant. Reduces a lot of heartache and nightmares down the road, because you've got your manual. This is how you deal with me. So you've opened up that conversation. So when somebody is derailing, it can come from a point of trust, going, are you okay? I've noticed this. So they're spotting you, they're covering you. There's also another brilliant book called the Everyone Culture. There's a company over in the US that when everybody starts the company, they do a quick 5 minutes and they say, this is the area I'm working on. This is the area that I get stressed about. So if you see me in this situation, call it out for me, because I may have not even registered it.
Yeah.
So it's building that culture. And I think that's what's really important, again, from that top down, that you've got that circle of trust that you can rely on, and the intention is to help each other. And you can see that other person potentially falling or stumbling.
That read me is a really nice idea. I heard another company talk about having that as well, almost like, like you said, your user manual to you that you write when you start, that's a summary of, this is me, this is what motivates me, this is what doesn't, this is what I struggle with, this is how I react when I'm stressed. That can also be a really nice way of sharing things about yourself that you might not feel comfortable sitting on a call and telling everybody. You know, I've had some really interesting conversations through this series so far, and one in particular was with somebody that's a coach on neurodiversity. And she had this fascinating statistic that I'm about to completely butcher because I'm going to not remember the exact figures, but it was the discrepancy between the percentage of people, particularly in the STEM sector, that would identify as neurodivergent versus the percentage of people that have disclosed that to their employer. So there are a lot of people that would say, I believe I am, or I am either self-diagnosed or externally diagnosed as neurodivergent, but I don't feel comfortable sharing that. I haven't told anybody that. And having that kind of read me document that, you know, enables you to be able to perhaps share something about yourself in a slightly less exposing, slightly less vulnerable way, maybe, can really help you to understand each other. And
wonderful.
I like that idea.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that. I think it's a really important thing as well in smaller groups, when you can share that and build that confidence. Again, it's building that muscle memory that it's okay to be vulnerable and to share this, and we're sharing this to be better as a team, as individuals, and we're there to help each other. It can be so powerful. It really can, in unlocking high performance, in unlocking a happy work environment. When people are happy, their brains are releasing all these beautiful chemicals that make them optimal at what they do. Optimal around their colleagues, and you've just got this wonderful chemistry, literally brain chemistry, that is working for the better. What's not to love about that? Absolutely. And it comes from a conversation.
Love that. I think that's a beautiful point to leave it on. So, G, thank you so much for spending that time with me today, and for coming back after we'd had to postpone, because I know, you know, we had a few scheduling things prior to Christmas. So thank you so much for making some time for me at the beginning of what I understand is a very busy time for everybody. I hugely appreciate it. And there's so much that you've shared there. I think that was so rich in value and insights that I think will be really useful for founders, regardless of the stage of business that they're at. How can people get in touch with you if they have questions, if they want to talk about how they could work with you?
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I've loved this conversation. It's great. You're a phenomenal interviewer, so thank you so much. If you'd like to get in contact with me, just message me on LinkedIn or g@rorcas.com. I'm a complete LinkedIn social media tart, so I will respond to you. There's no other way. I love the platform. So yeah, just drop me a line, and I'd love to connect with you. And yeah, wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks again for your time, and thanks everybody that's listened. That is now a wrap on series 7. So thank you everybody that has been with us throughout this series, that's listened to these episodes. I really hope it's been valuable for you. And we will be back in literally a matter of a few weeks to kick off series 8, where we are going to be focusing on speaking to climate tech investors and getting their insight and their views on what this year has to bring. So do come back and join us in a couple of weeks' time for that. But for now, thanks to G, thanks to everybody listening.